Hello and a very good day. My name is Abhilash and I am from the AD Solutions or the Active Directory Solutions teams here at ManageEngine, and I would be your presenter for today. Now, before we go ahead and get started, I hope all of you are safe and I hope all of you are indoors. And thank you so much for attending today's webinar. It really does mean a lot. Now, before I go ahead and jump in, I would like to run a quick audio and a video check because I want to make sure that everybody out here today is able to hear me well and is able to see the screen well. So I'll quickly start with an audio check. If you can hear my voice, if my voice is well and audible, just use the chat box in front of you to give me a confirmation. Just use the chat box in front of you. Just say yes, okay, great. So I can confirm that my voice is reaching to you well and clear. Perfect, thank you so much. Now, if you can see the screen, the title, core concepts of Azure Active Directory, and my email ID, can you just give me another confirmation? Thank you so much, guys. All right, perfect. Now, before I go ahead and jump in, I would like to tell you that the entire session is being recorded and the recording would reach to you via your email post the webinar. So if you've got any questions, use the same chat box in front of you, keep them coming. And I promise I will take your questions towards the end of the webinar. And even if I miss taking your questions, please do not worry. I'll make sure I reach out to you via email. Now, if you have any questions after the webinar, you could always drop an email to me at abi@manageengine.com. That's abi@manageengine.com, and I would be more than happy to help you out. So yes, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. Today's webinar's title is Core Concepts of Azure Active Directory, Demystifying Identity Governance. Now, why did I choose to speak about this topic today? Why are we going to talk about Azure Active Directory and what are we going to address in particular? So here's a quick look at what we're going to talk about today. It's no secret that organizations are slowly transitioning towards the cloud. We all know this. It's not traditional on-prem environments anymore. Organizations are slowly embracing the hybrid environments or hybrid cloud. The transition isn't fully complete to the cloud, but we are somewhere in the middle, right? Hence the term hybrid. Now that we are transitioning towards the cloud, there are a lot of identity and access management challenges that we face. Now, identity and access management challenges is a really old story. This was something we used to face for on-prem setups, on-prem Active Directory as well. But now with the introduction of cloud-based applications, the problem has gotten more widespread. The problem has gotten more compounded. So in today's webinar, we will be discussing about Azure Active Directory and mainly the concepts of identity and access governance in Azure Active Directory. How can we set up identities? How can we secure access? And how can we secure our users within Azure Active Directory? So it's just a heads up, this is going to be a knowledge-based webinar on plain Azure Active Directory features. All right, and those features mainly revolve around identity and access governance. And why did I choose Azure Active Directory? Why not AWS? Or why not Google Cloud, for instance? The reason I chose to speak about Azure Active Directory because it's the most popular choice. Seamless integration between applications, support extending to on-prem Active Directory makes Azure Active Directory a very, very popular choice. And when we transition to cloud, whether it's on-prem or cloud or hybrid, it's important to secure access and govern identities access in a very secure and a safe manner. And that's exactly what we're going to discuss today. So let's take a quick look at today's agenda. We'll take a look at the status of cloud adoption in 2020. Right, so how are businesses adopting the cloud? Which cloud model are they choosing? Is it single cloud, multi-cloud, hybrid cloud? And which application is sought after? Which cloud application has gained most popularity, is being adopted the most? In the second part of today's webinar, we'll take a look at 5 popular reasons or 5 typical reasons businesses prefer Azure Active Directory over other cloud environments. right? And the third part of today's webinar, we are going to cover up the fundamentals of Azure Active Directory. We'll take a look at the basics of Azure Active Directory because it would be unfair to directly jump into identity governance. So let's just start with the basics and we'll take baby steps towards identity and access governance. The fourth part, we'll take a look at access management challenges in hybrid environments. And finally, we learn how to implement Azure AD's inbuilt identity and access governance suite to govern and manage access effectively. So the status of cloud adoption in 2020, what do we have? Nearly 97% of organizations that have more than 1,000 employees are shifting towards the cloud. Now the cloud approach varies. They've taken single cloud, they've taken private clouds just within their organization, hosting their own applications, or they've adopted the public cloud. Right? And you can see here that hybrid cloud, meaning a combination of on-prem and cloud, is 58%. So hybrid cloud is more sought after. And this is a report that was generated by Flexera in 2019. And now I'm pretty sure the number has only grown. Hybrid cloud strategy is opted more and more by organizations so they can support the needs of their employees. And when I say cloud applications, or when I say organizations adopting the cloud, these three applications typically come in mind: Amazon Web Services, Azure AD, and Google Cloud. And that's exactly the order in which they're being adopted. Right? Amazon Web Services is being adopted the most, but Azure AD is no less. Seconding Amazon AWS, Azure AD is quickly catching up with Amazon AWS's core. 60% of organizations in 2019 have already adopted Azure AD, and in 2020, the number is constantly growing, almost getting equal to that of Amazon's Web Services cloud service. So Azure AD is quickly gaining popularity, and hybrid cloud is the one that's chosen the most. Now, why do businesses actually prefer Azure AD? Why do they like Azure AD? Here are 5 reasons businesses actually choose Azure Active Directory. Number one, Azure Active Directory is by Microsoft, right? Everybody uses Windows devices, so it's globally available. There are around 28 data centers around the world. Azure Active Directory provides pre-integration. It comes pre-built with thousands of SaaS applications like Salesforce, applications like Office 365, applications like Microsoft Teams. And most of these applications are also Microsoft applications that are used by organizations where the backend is Azure Active Directory. Azure Active Directory can extend control to your on-prem Active Directory. So there is no need to change anything. All you have to do is install Azure and share access between on-prem and Azure Active Directory. And the best part about Azure is that it works with more than just Microsoft software. It supports your on-prem applications. It supports your organization's applications. It supports your external applications as well. So there is no chance of the popular term that we use called vendor lock-in. We do not have to depend on Microsoft's products alone. We can use any application that we want, and Azure AD will provide the support. So this is a quick look back into Azure AD. These are the basics of Azure AD. As we all know, Azure AD has users and groups just like Active Directory. Azure AD supports your on-prem applications. Azure AD supports Microsoft applications such as Office 365, Teams, and Sway, where the backend is Azure AD. Azure AD supports access to your on-prem Active Directory resources, and the list simply goes on. Virtual machines, SQL databases, you name it. Right? And Azure AD can be integrated with on-prem Active Directory, and you can choose a single sign-on method as well. For instance, password synchronization, where the password hash is synchronized between on-prem and Azure AD. Or you could use pass-through authentication, right? Where an agent has to be installed on the servers, and Azure AD does the authentication and the authorization. So a quick look at the components that make up Azure AD. There is Azure Active Directory free. There is Azure Active Directory premium licenses, P1 and P2 licenses. P1 and P2 licenses offer more security, more control, more monitoring, and hybrid environment support. An Azure AD tenant is something that your organization has, right? So whenever, as an organization, whenever you sign up with Azure Active Directory, you get a domain that says your company name at onmicrosoft.com. Now that is your Azure AD tenant. You can have a single Azure AD tenant wherein the resources are shared between on-prem and Azure Active Directory within your organization, or you could have a multi-Azure AD tenant where there are multiple tenants and the resources are shared between multiple organizations. Azure AD subscription is something you pay. A subscription is a pay basis to access Azure Active Directory resources. Now there is a single subscription wherein you can have a single subscription and you can buy resources under that subscription, or you could have separate subscriptions depending on the teams in your organizations as well. There are main roles in Azure Active Directory. One is the Azure AD Global Administrator. A global administrator is a person who gains full access over Azure AD and its resources. And this is the person who typically configures Azure Active Directory or sets up Azure Active Directory. There is an account administrator in Azure Active Directory who primarily manages billing within Azure Active Directory. And there is a service administrator who manages resources within Azure Active Directory. The features of Azure Active Directory are innumerable. App management, your external apps, your SaaS applications, your cloud-based Azure-related applications, your authentication between on-prem and cloud, your B2B, meaning your external business partners and your vendors can come and share your corporate data. Your customers can have an account within your Azure Active Directory to access your company data. Azure Active Directory provides hybrid identity management, meaning your user that's on Active Directory and Azure Active Directory can be managed with Azure AD. There is device management, your users' company devices, mobile phones, tablets, everything can be managed with Azure Active Directory. And we've got Azure Active Directory, of course, wherein we've got users, groups, etc. And we've got reporting and monitoring as well. Now, I know there's a lot of information for just an introduction, but these are the key components that we have to know in order to understand what we are going to do further. Now, when I say widespread access, right? When I say Azure Active Directory offers more access, offers more support, offers more applications, and this support extends to on-prem Active Directory as well, the problem becomes more compounded. The problem becomes more and more difficult because it's just not on-prem AD anymore. You don't need to secure access to the computers in your organization and file servers in your organization. You now need to secure access to applications that are on the public cloud, that are on the private cloud, right? So there are identities everywhere, accessing everything. End users have their personal devices. Each user has multiple devices. And now they're not just accessing on-prem or in-house company data, but they are accessing cloud data as well. Now that we are working from home, users are accessing this data from their home networks. So when I say a hybrid environment with Azure AD, there is widespread access, there is increased number of devices, there are innumerable resources, and the access and identity governance problem only keeps growing. So 4 crucial questions that we need to ask ourselves whenever we set up Azure Active Directory or any cloud deployment for that matter. It could be on-prem, it could be hybrid, it could be straight out cloud, but these 4 questions are something that we need to always ask. Which of my users have access to what resources? What are the users doing with the access? What are the effective controls for managing access? And can the auditors verify that the controls are working properly? A strong identity and access governance, a foundation of it is crucial because we need to ensure security. We need to ensure that the right people have access to the right resources, but we cannot take a beat on end users' productivity as well. We cannot waste the end users' time, right? So timely and secure access is what we need to look for. So this is what we have in Azure Active Directory to manage access to resources. It's called role-based access control, or RBAC in short. Right now, whenever I say identities and access governance within Azure Active Directory, this is the first thing that comes up. It's much like your on-prem Active Directory delegation, right? Where you have a user, where you have a group of users, where you have a service principal, mainly a user account configured in Azure Active Directory to manage applications, or you have managed identities as well. This is much like a managed service account, right? All of these accounts, all of these security principles are assigned a particular role, right? And the role has a scope. Right now, when I talk about roles, there are three important roles. There's an owner, there's a contributor, and there is a reader. Right? An owner basically has access to all resources within Azure Active Directory and can delegate access. A contributor is similar to the owner, but a contributor cannot delegate access, and a reader can read everything in Azure Active Directory. Now, there are plenty of built-in roles that you can use in Azure Active Directory, and there are a number of custom roles that can be created with PowerShell as well. Right, so you've got a security principal, you've got a role assigned to the security principal, and you've got access to a particular scope. Now, scope access is always inherited. Let's say you have a group with multiple resources in it. So if you assign access to the particular group, access flows down to the child resources as well. So this is the basics of Azure role-based access control. A user, a role definition, a role is assigned to the particular user, and access to the respective resources, and that access flows down from the parent resource to the child resource as well. Azure Active Directory role-based access control, or RBAC in this case, works without the premium license. So it works with the free license. But when I say free, right, there are some limitations that come with it. You do not have time-based access. Let's say you have users to whom you delegate access to. Let's say you delegate access to a few users right now. Right? So you cannot immediately or automatically revoke the access after a fixed period of time. Let's say you give a user the right to manage passwords within Active Directory. The user is a password administrator within Azure Active Directory, right? And you want the user to manage passwords only for a month or only for a week. Post that, you want to revoke the access, but all of this has to be done manually. And this is the problem that we've been facing from on-prem Active Directory. Right? There is no time-based access. Administrators and help desk technicians forget to revoke access. And frankly speaking, it's not their fault because there's a lot of work to be done. There's no approval-based access with Azure role-based access control, meaning whenever a role is assigned to a user, you cannot set up an approval method. Right? You cannot have a manager or an authorized user double checking the assignment to the particular role to the end user. All of this is not that transparent. There is no multi-factor authentication. For instance, whenever a user gets a privileged role or activates a privileged role, there is no multi-factor authentication to double check the user's identity. Now, let me illustrate this, right? I am an attacker. I compromised a user's system and somehow I got access to a privileged user's account. Right now, what will I do as a rogue user? I will take the privileged user's account and I will create more and more backdoor entries, more and more privileged users using role-based access control within Azure Active Directory. Because there's no approval, there's no one double checking it. There's no multi-factor authentication. There's no one checking my identity twice. There is no time-based access. So if I create backdoors, the backdoors can remain persistent for a long period of time. So that's why we need an identity governance strategy within Azure Active Directory. Now, Microsoft did sense this problem and they built something called the Azure AD Identity Governance Suite. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about now. The components of the Azure Active Directory Identity Governance Suite. The components that we must set up right away to secure access to not just our Azure resources, but our on-prem resources and applications as well. Right? But the catch here is with Azure AD Identity Governance Suite, we need the premium license. Now, granted that the premium license is just a little expensive, but it's important that we have the control that we need. Right? Azure Active Directory provides you, Azure Active Directory Identity Governance Suite provides you with the capabilities to ensure that the right people have access to the right resources and there is sufficient visibility. So it mainly addresses these three issues, right? Governs the identity lifecycle. For instance, a user has joined my organization today. Right? How can I ensure that the user has timely access to the resources that the user needs? Number two, how can I ensure that the user's access can be updated over time securely? Right? That's govern access lifecycle. It's no secret that once a user gets into an organization, his access will not remain the same. Access keeps changing according to requirements, right? Now, how do I secure that process? How do I make sure that I am intimated, that I am alerted whenever there is an access change? And last but not the least, how do we secure privileged access? Because privileged access is a key component of identity governance in Azure Active Directory. So there are three things we need to do. We need to grant access securely. We need to watch access whenever updated or whenever given or whenever changed. And we need to secure privileged access. Securing these three pillars, these three problematic pillars, can help us get back the control that we need in Azure Active Directory. So the identity governance suite mainly has three features, right? Three components to the Azure Active Directory identity governance suite. We've got entitlement management, we've got access reviews, and we've got privileged identity management. And these three are the features you need to enable to ensure access is governed and managed effectively in Azure Active Directory. Now I'm going to call the identity governance suite IDS to make it simple. So it's a really long word. So yeah, hope you catch along. So let's just start off with the first part, right? Let's just start off with entitlement management. And like I said earlier, govern the identity lifecycle, grant timely and secure access to the end users when they join the organization or when they need access. That's the first part. We need to ensure that whenever resources are given, they are documented, there is sufficient visibility, and the entire process is extremely secure. Right? So this is how entitlement management works. So Azure AD typically works on the basis of access packages. Now, access packages have multiple resources in them. And by multiple, I just mean 4 resources, right? Access packages can have groups within Azure Active Directory. Access packages can have applications, SharePoint Online sites, and privileged roles. So what I'm trying to say here is, with the identity governance suite and with entitlement management, as an administrator or as a manager, I can create an access package. And I can securely give that access package to my end users so they can use it. But at the same time, everything is monitored, everything is documented. Now, when there are multiple access packages, it's called a catalog, right? Catalog has multiple access packages. So this is how it's going to work, right? Why do we have to use entitlement management? Why do we exactly need it? Like I said earlier, managing access is extremely challenging because requirements change. Users keep coming and keep going, and we need to ensure that access is granted in a secure manner. And whenever a user joins in, right, let me show this using an example. When you joined your company first, right, you didn't know what resources you needed access to. So what you typically do is you consult your manager or you consult the appropriate person. Right? And once access is granted to you, there is very less chance that the access will be revoked after a given amount of time. That's the problem that we face, right? We do not know how to get the access that we need whenever we need it. We do not know the person to approach. And even if we do all of that, we have the access for a very long period of time. These problems are just compounded for your external users and your business partners. For example, no one person can know the details of individuals of other organizations. Let's say you've got partners coming in from the other organization, right? How can one person know what access is given to them? And even if the person knows, how will the person remember the access that was given to them? And how will the person remember to revoke the access in a timely manner? So enough talk. Let me quickly show you a quick example of entitlement management. So if I head on to my browser, you can now see that I have Azure Active Directory open here. I'm sure you may have seen this portal. All you have to do is click on the menu blade right here and head into Azure Active Directory. And once you are in Azure Active Directory, head back to the menu blade, scroll down, and you will find something called Identity Governance. And you can see here that I'm logged in as a global administrator. Right? I am the person who created Azure Active Directory. So this is my account right here, and I will click on Identity Governance. And you can see that there are 3 parts to the identity governance: entitlement management, access reviews, and privileged identity management. And that's exactly what we're going to take part of now. So once I click on entitlement management, here we are. Right? So like I said, we are now going to create an access package, namely a package with resources that my end users need and that I will give access to as an administrator or as a manager. Right? So this is what I'm going to do. The resources are needed by the QA team. So I'm going to type in QA resources for testing team, right? The description here is going to be resources needed by my testing team for application 1, right? And once that's done, all I have to do is click next, and I will add in the resources required. So I'll just quickly add in a group. So let's just call the group testing. Here we go. Testing team app 1 is the group that they need access to. I'll quickly add in an application as well. Now AD360 is the app we are testing now. So AD360 is what I will add here. And last but not the least, let's just add in a SharePoint site as well. So I'll quickly search for a communication site for team communication. And here we go, right? Just simply click select and it's added. And once all of these are added, the next thing that you need to do is select a role for your user, meaning what are your users doing with that application? What kind of access do they have, right? For the group, I want my user to be a member. For the AD360 application, I want the user to have default access. And for the site, I want my user to be a member of the site. And once I click next, you can give away the access package to users inside your organization or outside, meaning your vendors or your business partners. So I'll just give it to the users inside my organization. Specific users or groups, I'll simply select my group here, which happens to be the testing team. Right, so I'll just type that in. Here I have my testing team right here. Require approval, meaning whenever users are given this access, does approval need to be granted? I'll just leave it as no, because it's my team, I know what's happening. And enable new requests and assignments, I'm going to give that to a yes. And once I click next, when does the access package expire? How long can the users have that access for? This is a project for worth 3 months, right? So I'm just going to give in 90 right here. And require access reviews, I'm just going to give it as no. And once I click next, you can see the summary, right? There's an app, there's a site, and there is also a SharePoint site. App, application, and SharePoint site, and for users within my testing team. All I have to do is click create. You can now see that the access package is created, right? All I have to do is simply click on the package, and now I'll copy the link. Link is copied. And what I'm going to do now is open up a new browser right here, and I will log in as another user called Chris. Right, as you can see, I'm opening up another browser, and I will simply paste the link that I got from my administrator or from my manager in this case. So once I click on it, here we go, access is loading. I will sign in as Chris, key in Chris's password. Right, and you can see that I'm now logged in as Chris. Now all I'm going to do is, here we go. We've got the access package granted to me or Chris by the manager. So there's no need for searching. There's no need for asking people. The manager of the department can grant access to specific resources to the end user. So I'll just select the package and request the access. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to provide a business justification. Need it to work on app 1. And once I click submit, you can now see that the resource request is now submitted. It's being processed. And if I head back into my access packages right here and click on active, you can now see that all the contents of the access package are being delivered. Right, so within a few seconds, all the resources within that access package will be delivered to me as my end user, and I can perform the tasks that I need. So a quick recap of what we saw right now. Right, so we've got resources, 3 types of resources access packages work with: your groups, your applications, and your SharePoint sites. Right, and you can give in access to the particular group. And there are policies that can be configured that we just did right now. Right? How long can the user have access for? Do we need approval? Right? So all policies can be configured for your internal users, and an access package can be created and granted to your internal users. And the same process can be done for users outside your organization as well. So this is how it worked, right? The manager creates an access package with the required resources and assigns users who can request that access along with an expiry time, shares a link to the user logs in, requests the access package, and the access will be granted by the manager. So this is how entitlement process works. This is how you can grant resources to your end users all in a secure manner. Now let me quickly show you how auditing works with this. So if I head into Azure AD, right, you can now see that I'm still logged in as the global administrator. And all I have to do now is click on assignments right here. And you can see that Chris user is right here. And if I click on Chris, okay, so the status is still delivery. So once the status is delivered and I click on Chris, I can find out all the packages that were granted and I can make the changes that I wish to make, right? And I spoke about auditing, right? In order to audit, all we have to do is head into Azure Active Directory again, click on the menu blade, scroll down, and we will have audit logs right here. In order to check the audit logs for entitlement management, all you have to do is simply select the service and select entitlement management right here. And here we go. Once you select it, you have all users and their respective entitlement management. Right, so let's just give this a second and you can see that the role has been accessed to Chris screen. All the details are available right here and all you have to do is simply select the service and select what you wish to audit. Right, so this is how entitlement management works and this is how you can grant access to resources to your end users. Next up, we have to review access to the resources. So how do we go about reviewing access to resources and why do we need it? Right, so reviewing access to resources typically is needed whenever access changes are made over time. Right, so let's say there are access changes made right now, right? A user joined, it's been a month, there are access changes made, but we want that process to be secure as well. Access to groups, applications within SharePoint, within Azure Active Directory have to be secured as well. And that can be done by reviewing the access to particular resources. So that's when access review comes in the picture, right? Because productivity is great with Azure Active Directory. There's widespread access, there are applications, there are on-prem applications, there are resources in Azure Active Directory, there are on-prem resources, there are your users within your organization, there are your external business partners, but access must be double checked because identities are the control plane in Azure or hybrid deployments. Right, so let's go ahead and without further ado, let's check out access reviews in Azure Active Directory. But before we jump in, why exactly do we need access reviews? There are too many users in privileged roles, right? That's a problem that we face with on-prem Active Directory as well as hybrid deployments as well. There are many users. So we do not know who has privileged access and who has the delegated access. So whenever users are granted privileged access, we can have a multiple step checkpoint in place, right? And when automation is not an option is another point. Let's say you have an automation that you created one with PowerShell that gives users access to a group or an application for a fixed period of time. And when the automation expires or when the automation ends, the access is ungranted, right? And what if this user needs access after the expiry of the automation? Would you create another automation? Or would you set up a review or an access review with multiple checkpoints? Whenever groups are created for new purposes, right? For instance, I have an application that is launching today and I want users to access it, right? It's a new application, it's a confidential application, and I want only trusted users to access it. Whenever new things are created, you can always have an access review check in place to double check the access. And then you can also have access reviews when critical business data is being accessed. Right? Let's say a crucial data within an SQL database or an application. Whenever there is critical business data on Azure Active Directory, you can have access reviews to double check access to that particular application, to that particular confidential or crucial application. And last but not the least, when you need to give access to your exception users, or when you need to give access to your guest users. Who are your guest users? Now, let's say there's an Office 365 group that grants access to resources, right? And you've got a vendor coming in today. So you create a temporary account for the vendor and you wish to give access to the vendor, right? So when you do this, you will want that access to be double checked by people, and you want that access to be removed after a fixed period of time. Now that's when access reviews come into the picture. And let me quickly show you how this works. If I head on to Azure Active Directory, and all we have to do now is repeat the same process, right? Head into Identity Governance, and here we have access reviews right here. And once I click on Create an Access Review, this is where you can double check users' access to applications and groups. All right, so I'll just name the access review something here. I'm just gonna call it marketing group access check, right? The description, checking guest access to the marketing group, right? You can have a start date that could be now, that could be a date in the future, and you can set a frequency as well. Let's say weekly. I want the access review to run every week, right? End by never, because I want this to be a constant check in place. And here we go. Users to review, members of the group. Whenever users are added to the group, I want it to be reviewed. And who do we want to be reviewed? Do we want everyone or just the guest users? I'll just let it be guest users for now. You can select the group that you want. In this case, it's going to be the marketing group. You can even link a program here if you wish, right? So once I select the group, you can set the reviewers to the group. So the reviewers can be the owners of that particular group, or it could be selected users, or it could be a self-review process as well. I can link a program to this entire process. For instance, let's say you have a compliance program running in your organization that records every access checks, every access request within Azure or on-prem Active Directory. So you can just set up the program here and it will run with the access reviews, right? And we've got a few advanced settings here as well. If, for instance, if reviewers don't respond, what do you do? Approve the access, remove the access, or take in system recommendations, right? There are a few advanced settings. So whenever approvers approve the access, they will need to provide an access. The user is joining my team. This is why I need to give them the access. So that you can enable a few more notifications. And once you click start, the access review process starts. And I repeat, this works for groups and applications and privileged Azure Active Directory roles, which I'll shortly be showing to you in privileged identity management, right? And how do we check access reviews? Pretty straightforward, right? All you have to do is simply head on to the audit logs again and show them the access review, like we did for entitlement management. Select the service to be an access review and show them and check for audits for particular access review requests and access review grants. Right? This is how a manager or an authorized user would see an access review. And he can approve it, deny it, or say, I don't know, so it can be passed on to another person. Right? So the first step was granting access securely, which is what we did with entitlement management and access packages. And the second step is access reviews. Whenever access is changed or updated or granted in the future, you can have double checks in place with this feature. Last up, we have to manage our privileged and our sensitive users, right? That is a key part of any identity governance strategy, and Azure AD can help you with that. Azure AD has Azure AD roles, meaning roles built into Azure AD that are used to manage Azure Active Directory, and resource roles as well. Resource roles are used to manage privileged Azure Active Directory resources. So what are the features of Azure AD Privileged Identity Management? You can give in just-in-time privileged access to Azure AD and resources. That's something you never found in Azure RBAC or role-based access control. So once the time expires, the user loses the access. You can set up multiple checkpoints just like access reviews. So whenever users are granted access to resources, right, you can set up multiple checkpoints to double check the access. You can download the audit history for your privilege grants and privilege changes. You of course have notifications via email, and you've got business justifications, right? And you've got multi-factor authentication as well before a user activates any kind of privileged access. Now, let's say I, as an attacker, have compromised an end user's machine, right? So once I log into Azure, I will need to undergo multi-factor authentication before activating privileged identity management. So this is how it's going to work, right? Let me quickly show you a demo. If I head into Azure portal and I head into home, this is what we have, right? All I have to do is head into Azure Active Directory again, identity governance, and last but not the least, we've got privileged identity management. If I click on it, you can now see privileged identity management board right here. And all I'm going to do right now is click on manage access. Right now, like I said, access can be delegated to your Azure Active Directory resources or Azure Active Directory to manage Azure Active Directory. Let me quickly show that to you right here. Here we go. We've got Azure AD roles and we've got Azure AD resources as well. So for this experiment, let's go ahead and delegate access to Azure Active Directory to manage Azure Active Directory objects. So I'll just select the user administrator role. This role is to manage and create groups and users within Active Directory. So I'll just click on it. And now you can see that there are no eligible roles, right? So I'll just click on add assignments and I will add a particular user. In this case, the user happens to be, let's say, Chris Green again. Here's my user, select, and we have now given the user administrator privilege role. All you have to do is click next to further move in with the process. And there are two kinds of assignment types, right? There's eligible assignment, there's active assignment. Now, what is active eligible assignment? So whenever a role is granted to a user, the user will have to log in, activate the role, undergo multi-factor authentication if there is a process set up, and only then will the user be able to perform tasks related to that particular role, right? If I select active, the user can simply log in and start performing tasks with the role without having to activate it because we've already set it as active. But now I'm going to set it as eligible and maximum a duration that the user can hold the privileged role for, right? I'm going to let that to be for, let's say, this time. It starts now, the role access starts at this time and ends at this time, right? And all I have to do is click assign. And you can now see Chris Green is being assigned the role user administrator. Let me open up my browser here again, close this, open a new tab, and log into Azure Active Directory as Chris Green, who's being assigned the administrator role or the privileged role. So I'll quickly head into it. You can now see that I'm logged in as Chris, and I will repeat the same process again. Azure Active Directory, scroll down, select identity governance right here. But what we're going to do here is head into privileged identity management and then select my roles, right? We're not going to head into manage roles, but my roles, because I want to check the roles assigned to me by the administrator. Here we have the user administrator role. And once I click activate, right, the request is being validated. And I will set the duration that I need the access for. I'm just going to call it 11 hours. And the reason needed to manage accounts for partners or guests, right? And once I click activate, this is the process of activation of privileged roles within Azure Active Directory. So first the role is activated, then it double checks the role. And once the activation is complete, we will have to log back out and log in and see the role assigned to Chris Green, right? So I'm going to quickly sign out. Let's just give this a second. That's perfect. Sign back in as Chris Green, right? So this is going to be Chris Green's password. Signing in. Yes. And if I head into Azure Active Directory, you can now see that Chris Green has been assigned the role of a user administrator. This is how privileged identity management works in Azure Active Directory. Now let me quickly head back to the admin console and show you a few important things with regard to privileged identity management. Right now, once you're here, all you have to do is head into Azure AD roles and all right, so my roles. So you can see that this particular user has no roles, unlike Chris. So I'll head into manage roles, right? So I'll just search for the role name who happens to be the user administrator. I'm going to click on it. And now you can see that the number of active roles or the eligible roles are these many, right? So let me quickly search. So here I have my user Chris, and the role of user administrator is granted to Chris. Now I can remove the role or I can update the role to something else, and I can add further assignments to Chris. If I quickly head into settings, you can see more security settings relating to privileged identity management. If I click on edit, here's what you'll find, right? You can set the duration, a default duration that the user can request access for. We earlier set it as 11.5, you can recollect. Now I can set it as an administrator. On activation of the role, require Azure MFA or require none. Require justification on activation. We saw that the user has to provide a reason as to why he needs the role. And you can also set up an approval process, right? Let's say you have a group of members or another authorized user that you wish who has to check role activations before they are actually given to the end user. So you can set another checkpoint right here. And if I head into notification, you can now see that whenever roles are assigned to users, right? Or whenever roles are assigned by an admin to another user or by a help desk to another user, alerts can be sent via email, right? And the approval mails can also be sent to the approver and administrator if you wish to have that double check in place. And in order to audit privileged identity management, all you have to do is simply head into Azure Active Directory again, scroll down, select audit logs, right? So where are my audit logs? Here we go. And all you have to do is select a particular service. In this case, I'm going to call the privileged identity management, right? So where do I have the service? All right, so looks like it's not enabled yet, but this is how it would work. So here's how you'd find privileged identity management, but here we go. We can find the PIM role right here, and we can find that Chris Green has been added the PIM role, right? All you have to do is simply select it from service category, apply the filters that you want, set the date that you want, and if you wish, you can set up date, you can set up a custom date as well, and you can find out all the logs right here. So I'm sure this was a lot of information. So let's just do a quick overview, right? We started off with entitlement management, right? So let me quickly head back and show you what we just did. So these are the three components that we discussed today: entitlement management, access reviews, and privileged identity management. Entitlement management is to grant access securely. Access reviews is to double check access updations or access changes that are made to your users, right? Whenever users are given access to Azure AD resources, you can have a multiple check in place. And last but not the least, we also checked our privileged users, right? And this is how we can audit privileged users within Azure Active Directory, just the audit logs for everything. But setting up these three important identity and access governance components is crucial for you to get the control that you need, which cannot happen with the free license. Unfortunately, you need the premium license, but it's worth it because you have the security and you have the visibility that you need, right? And if you can recollect, we saw a couple of auditing related features in Azure Active Directory. And these auditing related features have their own limitations. For instance, there's a log retention time, right? And Azure AD can only hold logs for 30 days, and 30 days is no time sufficient for holding logs, right? Let me show this using an example. Let's say you have an auditor or a compliance officer coming in today, and he asks for your logs that are, let's say, 2-3 months old, right? But you can't do it because Azure AD only holds logs for 30 days, right? And according to research, a minimum of 206 days is required to analyze and to discover breaches. But if the log just lasts for 30 days, we're out of luck. There's no hybrid AD auditing from Azure Active Directory. By this, I mean, you can audit Azure resources within Azure Active Directory, but for on-prem Active Directory, you still have to resort to the typical event viewer. There's no single pane of glass. There's no one place where you can see both events and where you can compare. There's poor filtering capabilities. As you can see, all you got is those 4 options to filter and find logs, which is still very cumbersome. And there are no predefined compliance reports. Let's say SOX, HIPAA, your GDPR compliance, right? You need a set of reports for that. And there is no way you can find that with Azure Active Directory. Now you could ask me a question. Hey, if the logs only last for 30 days, can I not export them and store them? But the truth is you can export only 5,000 logs a time. Right? And if you've dealt with on-prem Active Directory, you will know how many logs are generated per minute or per hour. So 5,000 logs, pushing it out in a spreadsheet and reading through the spreadsheet to find anomalies or to help out your compliance officer is not a good deal. There's no alerting or scheduling built into Azure Active Directory. You'll have to use good old PowerShell to write commands, write scripts, and automate the entire process. Right? Now let me just give you a quick, small example. Your organization is subject to a simple brute force attack, a password brute force attack. An attacker has gained access and is trying to find your data, trying to discover your sensitive data within your organization. What would you do? How would you deal with it? Right? So can you imagine a particular scenario? An attacker has logged in. There's on-prem AD, there's Azure AD. Right? Attacker can log in from anywhere, try to gain access from anywhere. It's a huge widespread cloud environment. How would you discover the particular breach, and how would you conduct a remedial or a corrective action? AD360 can help you with that. AD360 can identify the source of the breach. Where did the breach happen from? The country, whether it's on premises or cloud. The tools or medium used to carry out the breach, whether it was a third-party software, a removable drive, or a built-in tool like PowerShell. Right? AD360 can help you produce real-time alerts whenever such malicious events are detected. The alerts can be generated. Admin help desk can be notified via email or via SMS. It can identify the type of attack, whether it's a brute force, whether it's a password spray, whether it's a privilege escalation, you name it. You can monitor your other Azure AD applications and resources with AD360 applications like your team, your Sway, your Office 365 mailboxes, and more. Azure AD360 can read into your sign-in activities. Whenever users sign in into on-prem, whenever users sign in into Azure, and whenever a potential attack attempt happens, AD360 can find that for you. Right? And finally, all the information here can be alerted upon, and you can run a remedial action. You can run a corrective action of that particular alert. For instance, if a user is found trying to enumerate data using domain reconnaissance, or a user is found trying to perform a password attack, AD360 will detect that, alert the admin, and also run a remedial script, a corrective script that will immediately disable the user or log out the user from the respective system. Right, so AD360 simply looks like this. AD360 has a lot of features in it, a lot of components, right? From managing your hybrid Active Directory, auditing your hybrid Active Directory, password self-service, and your Office 365 and your Azure AD related applications as well. So as you can see, there are a few reports right here. Azure AD applications, enterprise applications. You can monitor all of them, generate reports on them, and set alerts that can be sent to your administrator or help desk technician. So if I quickly head into AD Audit Plus right here, let me quickly show it to you on my instance. So this is AD Audit Plus, which is again a component of Azure Active Directory. I apologize for the delay. I have really slow internet here. Let's just quickly skip this. All right. And once I log in, what I'm trying to show you here is you can perform hybrid AD auditing just within a single pane of glass. If you can recollect, this is a feature that was missing for Azure Active Directory, right? There is no way you can find out on-prem and cloud, and no way you can audit both within one pane of glass, but AD Audit Plus can help you with that, right? All you have to do is head into reports, and you have something called Azure AD reports right here, and Active Directory reports as well. Right, you can of course find out here, for instance, for the brute force attack, you can find out the logon activity, you can set alerts, you can notify your system administrator, you can notify your help desk technicians, and you are good to go. Here you can see that I have a couple of alerts configured. Right, you can notify them via email, SMS, or execute a script that will run a remedial action like disable the user or log out the user. So yes, I think that's about it. Stay tuned for an AD360 webinar. As I told you, this is going to be a knowledge share webinar where we were going to look into the typical components of identity and access governance suite within Azure Active Directory, and we did just that. But stay tuned for our upcoming webinar on AD360, where we will delve deeper into solving your hybrid AD challenges, your on-prem AD, your Azure AD, your other application challenges as well. So now I will be pushing out 2 questions, and it would be really great if you could answer your questions, right? So I'll be pushing out a poll that will come across your screen. And if you could help me out with the answers, that would be really helpful. So I'll just launch the first poll. You will now see a question flash across your screen. And if you could help me out with the answers. Just given your answers so I can take this forward. Thank you so much. Just gonna let this be for a few more seconds. Thank you so much, guys. Now, I really hope you liked this session. I hope you found this session informative. This was just a touch on how you could manage and secure access within Azure Active Directory. And if you'd like to leave any feedback, the time would be now. I'll make sure I take your concerns and I'll make sure I work on it. And please do not forget, stay tuned for our AD360 webinar, where we will go deeper into managing, auditing your hybrid environments. Thank you so much for your responses, guys. I hope you found this session informative, and I hope you have a really, really nice day today. Stay safe, stay home, stay indoors, and have a good day today. Thank you so much, and have a nice day.